Hello, and welcome back to another Doctor Who action figure review, sort of. Today I'm taking a look at the Unreleased Mutt figure that would have been part of the 5.5-inch Doctor Who action figure range, but sadly was never released. Now, technically, this is like half a custom, half official, because it was sculpted as planned to be part of a release in the Doctor Who figure range, so the sculpt is authentic. The paint job is purely my own, so who knows what it would have looked like. To answer a few questions for those of you who don't know the story behind this, a little while ago, Dewar posted the CAD files for this Mutt prototype so that you could print off your own Mutt figure. The reason being was because he basically said there are absolutely no plans or sort of chances of this figure being released now. As far as I'm aware, it was originally planned as part of the Underground Toys partnership that Character Options had, so this probably would have been part of maybe a box set. It would have been a Forbidden Planet exclusive, basically. So it came about at the tail end of that. That just gives you an idea of when we might have seen this, and it is such a shame that it never happened because it's a phenomenal figure. The Mutts have always been a favourite monster of mine in terms of the design. I always thought they'd make an amazing figure, and turns out they do. I don't own a 3D printer, but a friend of mine very kindly printed off one of these. People have taken the CAD files and modified them since I'll release them, so they've added articulation and things like that. I've actually managed to get some articulation in this guy without gluing all the bits together, which has been good. So it means I do get a little bit of posing. It is incredibly heavy. It is very, very weighty. Obviously, it's 3D printed, so it's like a resin. I imagine had this have gone to production, the tail piece here, the lower abdomen, that would have all been hollowed out and stuff. But let's just go through it. I'll talk about it as if it was an actual figure, just looking at the sculpt. It looks amazing. Look how big and bulky this guy looks. It's kind of unlike any other Doctor Who figure we've got in the range. You know, we're so used to seeing very humanoid physiques or Daleks. So it's interesting to get something that's quite so bulky and hunched with the pincers and stuff. It looks great. The head sculpt is fantastic. The texturing across the whole thing is great. In the armor, in the sort of fleshy bits of the legs and the arms. But the head, as you can see, lots of texture there, all these little seams and lines in the face, all the ridges across the top of the head. They've taken some creative liberties with the mouth, so you can see they've got the little teethy bits at the bottom, and then they've got a sort of inner mouth, I guess, kind of quite xenomorph-esque, which looks really cool, really adds to the alienness. And then, of course, he has the classic little mandibles at the bottom there. And then down to the torso, again, like I said, lots of textural bits going on here, lots of seams and ridges that really create that armor effect. Particularly on the back, you've got all these nodules. If you remember the story of the mutants, the Solonians, when they start to transform into these creatures, the nodules, those nubs there, start to break through their clothing. It's really quite scary. It's a cool body horror look. Then we go down to this middle abdomen piece here, which I guess is meant to be more fleshy, less armoured. What I will say is, obviously, with a figure like this, with a character like this, they've taken some creative liberties just to make it maybe slightly more alien and less like a person in a suit, which I think is fair enough. I imagine that the actual costumes weren't quite as detailed as this, with the rigid spine down the back and all this sort of like weird sort of fleshy folds and stuff. It would have just been a bit of rubbery fabric, no doubt. It also means that they've sort of accentuated the insectoidness of the creature by making this quite slim. So they've tried to accentuate it to make it look more like a living, breathing alien creature, which I think is great. It works really well. And I think that's another thing to talk about in terms of the scale, which we'll come to in a bit. And then onto the arms, again, all this textural stuff. It's all those ridges and plates, you know, plated armor. And then you've got the little claws down the bottom on either side. You've got the really chunky lower abdomen piece, or the tail piece. You've got that armoured plating again, and then you've got some more sort of softer ridges on the inside. And then much like with the arms, the same can be found on the legs. Again, it's very textured, that armour plate, especially on the thighs, and then two large pincered feet. So like I said, this is a custom. I did paint this one myself, and I'm quite pleased with how it's turned out. In terms of assembly, this is how it came. So there was a little bit of cleanup to do with some sandpaper. And in terms of where I went from there, with my one, the legs are glued in securely to the tail piece because I thought this is such a weighty thing, it needs some stability. And I gotta be honest, this guy does not like standing up on his own. I've had to use blue tack at times to keep him upright because he's such a heavy thing. There it goes. Oh. I imagine if this had gone into production, it probably would have been like rotocast, so it would have been hollow and, more rubbery than this very hard, solid resin piece. So in terms of the scale of the thing, unfortunately, I don't have a Jon Pertwee figure to hand, but here he is next to two other equally sized figures compared to Jon Pertwee, which is the 4th Doctor and the 5th Doctor. He is fairly tall. He's probably taller than the actual actors in costume in the show, which I know led to a bit of debate because obviously there was a thought there to try and make it a little bit bigger and a little bit more monstrous, which I kind of like. And I think as a figure on the shelf, it certainly does that. I mean, he looks amazing. I'm really pleased with how he turned out. But I mean, obviously, the sculpt is incredible. This would have made such an amazing figure in the line. In terms of articulation, like I said, I glued the legs together just to give him some stability. All I did was I just used blue tack just to keep the arms and the head in place, just so that I don't have to keep it in one pose. I can manipulate it just a little bit. And so far, he seems absolutely fine. He hasn't really fallen apart that much. So had it have gone to production, he would have had articulation at the neck and the head. It's on a ball joint, so there would have been a lot of articulation there. His torso is on a joint as well. As you can see with mine, that joint still exists because it just clicked in quite well. I guess I could have added some blue tack or something to try and firm that up. But I quite like the wobble that he has because it kind of matches the way that they are in the program. They do sort of wobble around a bit, these guys. Would have had articulation at the waist, but again, I glued that down for stability. And then the arms would have been ball jointed. No articulation at the elbows. Articulation at the pincers in the hands, which again, something that I was able to keep. And then again, ball jointed legs. But yeah, I'm really, really pleased with how this guy came out. Huge thank you to Al for releasing those CAD files. I mean, it's a shame that we kind of know that this guy is never going to see the light of day as an official release. I'm kind of treating him like the lost figure. But really, really lovely stuff. An amazing sculpt. So let me know what you think about the Mutt figure. Would you have liked to have seen this in the line? Have you 3D printed your own one using the same files? Let me know. I'm interested to see what people think. And I'll catch you all next time for another Doctor Who action figure review. Hopefully of a figure that actually has been released. So see you all again soon. Bye-bye.